On the 21st of April 1918, a red Fokker DR-2 triplane crashed in the Somme, in an area that was defended by Australian troops. The pilot, 25-year-old German Manfred von Richthofen, slumped dead in the cockpit. Richthofen, probably better known by his nickname the Red Baron, was the number one scoring fighter ace of World War One on any side. Shortly before the crash, Canadian pilot Arthur Roy Brown had been pursuing and had fired a burst at Richthofen from his Sopwith Camel, and Brown was officially credited with shooting down Richthofen. However, the Canadian was not the only one who had opened fire on Richthofen. At least three Australians had opened fire from the ground on the distinctively red triplane. For more than 100 years, the debate has gone on. Who actually shot down the Red Baron? G'day, I'm Keith, and welcome to the Digger History Podcast. I've heard this story many times and heard about the debate about who shot down the Red Baron. Was it the Canadian pilot or was it the Australian ground troops? My inspiration for doing this episode was a recent visit to Canada. While I was in Calgary in Alberta, I visited the military museums, and I got into a conversation with a very knowledgeable and very informative and passionate volunteer in the Air Force section of the museum, who, amongst other things, started talking about the Red Baron. And I'm not sure at which point in the conversation he realised that I'm Australian, but we did have quite a good discussion about this. And it was this conversation that actually inspired me to do a podcast episode on this topic. On a side note, if you are in Calgary in Alberta, check out the military museums. They're quite very well worth a visit. I know I do have some Canadian listeners of this podcast, so I'm not sure where you guys are from, but big shout out to you guys. Maybe pop in the comments where you're from, because I've just recently been to parts of Canada for a visit. But but anyway, I kind of got a little bit inspired by this topic, and came home and did a bit more research in order to do this episode. So before we go on with the debate about who shot down the Red Baron, let's talk first about who the Red Baron actually was. And I kind of want to first kind of dispel a couple of popular myths or misconceptions that I guess movies and that have kind of put into our heads. So the name the Red Baron, from the research that I've done, I can't find any evidence that he was actually called the Red Baron during the war. It seems to be a name that has been given to him in retrospect. So probably like after the war, probably in popular culture, movies and things, that's probably where the name became more popular. But I can't find any evidence to suggest that he was actually called the Red Baron during the war. So look, in this podcast, look, um, I may call him the Red Baron. I may call him Richthofen, von Richthofen. Um, Look, I don't script these episodes. I have talking points, but they're not scripted. So no, whatever I say, I'm talking about the same person. Yeah, but chances are he probably wasn't called the Red Baron during the war. In fact, He was known in Germany as Der Rot Kampfflieger, and I've probably really ballsed up that pronunciation, but translated that means the red battle flyer. The Allies, so the French and the British, probably had various names for him. Probably not very polite names, some of them, but he was known by the French as the Petit Rouge, or the Little Red, or the Red Devil. The other misconception, um, is the aircraft that he flew. So the one he's more famously known for is the Fokker DR-1 triplane, the red Fokker DR-1 triplane, which he was finally shot down in. Um, but he only flew that towards the end of the war, towards the end, in like his final kind of months. He didn't fly that throughout the whole war. So in fact, most of his victories were done in an Albatross D3 biplane. So the famous red Fokker triplane that we see in most, I guess, pictures and media and movies of the Red Baron. Um, he only flew that towards the end of his career, and he scored 19 of the 80 victories in this little triplane. So the majority of victories were achieved in the biplane, in the Albatross biplane. So that the third thing I want to quickly say. So the title of this episode is "Who Shot Down the Red Baron?" Um, but he actually got shot down twice in his career. So the one I'm obviously talking about, this time is the one that ended his life. Um, but he was also shot down on the 6th of July 1917. It was forced down by a British pilot and landed. But he obviously survived that one. So yeah, just to clarify, this episode is about, who finally shot down the Red Baron, and ended, who killed the Red Baron. All right, so who was the Red Baron? I'm going to have a crack here at pronouncing his full name. Um, I know there are some German listeners to this podcast, so I do apologize if I completely balls up this pronunciation, but Manfred Albert Freyer von Richthofen was born in 1892. Richthofen was a minor nobleman. Um, he was born to a Prussian aristocratic family. The noble title was, and apologies again if I mispronounce this, but Freiherr, which is roughly translated into Baron in English. Hence the name after the war is given the Red Baron. So during the First World War, Richthofen initially joined up the army as a cavalryman, but on the Western Front, it was soon, I guess, discovered that there was not much use for traditional cavalry um, in the trench warfare. So not wanting to get relegated to mundane, boring tasks like counting blankets and things, um, Richthofen um, applied for a transfer to the Air Force, or the Flieger Troop. Again, forgive the pronunciation. So he first started off as an observer, so in the second seat of aircraft, but soon decided he wanted to be a pilot. And interestingly enough, um, Richthofen's first solo flight, he actually crashed the aeroplane. Obviously, this incident didn't faze him. He got back in and continued flying. And after that initial rocky start, he started racking up the victories against Allied British and French aircraft. And by the end of his career, he racked up he was credited with 80 aerial victories, which made him the highest scoring ace of the war on either side. The second highest scoring ace being French pilot René Franck, who scored 75 confirmed aerial victories. So von Richthofen also became a bit of a poster boy who was used for propaganda purposes throughout Germany during the war. Um, Obviously to help with recruitment and help with letting the public know how well they were doing in the war. From most accounts, Richthofen was quite tactical. He didn't seem to take unnecessary risks, which actually makes the story of how he eventually got shot down, a bit more, I guess, interesting and out of character. From most accounts, he also seemed to take his aerial combat a bit like a sporting contest. And in fact, he often used to land his aircraft after after a victory to to get a souvenir from the aircraft that he just shot down. One particular French aircraft he shot down, he'd actually got a chandelier made from the engine cowling of this aircraft. Um, I'm not sure how he would have fitted this engine cowling into his own aircraft to take it back. I know how tight, you know, getting getting carry-on baggage is into aircraft these days, so I'm not sure how he would have got this whole engine cowling back, but that's what he did, and he had a chandelier made from it. And he seemed to be quite respected not only by the Germans but also by the Allies. Um, Even though he was an enemy, he seemed to have a lot of respect amongst Allied pilots. Now, in June 1917, Richthofen was given command of a fighter wing called, and once again, forgive my pronunciation, but Jagdgeschwader 1, which became better known as the Flying Circus. Now, there's a couple of reasons why it probably got called the Flying Circus. Um, Firstly, because the aircraft were painted bright colours. So Richthofen started kind of a habit of painting his aircraft bright red so that his own people would recognise him instantly, and and quite possibly to I guess put fear into the Allied pilots, not recognizing his aircraft, knowing who he was. So that could have been a reason too that for painting the aircraft red. But the other aircraft in the wing were also painted bright colours as well. And the other reason for the flying circus name was because the unit actually travelled round a lot to front lines depending where the Allied activity was. So that often travelled around and had like tents and travelled in trains just like a circus would. And this flying circus, and I'm going to continue to refer to it as the flying circus because it's a lot easier to pronounce than the proper name for it. It was stacked up with a lot of aces. So von Richthofen wasn't only ace; there were quite a few aces um, with quite a lot of victories in this wing. So um, the flying circus was definitely like a well stacked team. Now, as I mentioned earlier, um, the um, the Red Baron had actually been shot down previously in July 1917. Um, a British pilot, um, funnily enough, could have been one of two pilots. There's no actual. Um, there's a bit of controversy about that too. Who shot him down the first time? It could have been Captain Donald Connell or Lieutenant A. Woodbridge. Um, it seems like they both opened fire on him, but either way, um, a bullet grazed his skull, um, and he had to actually force land his aircraft. Now, there is some suggestion here that because of this injury, he actually had a bit of brain damage, which may be a reason that contributed to his getting shot down the second and final time. But we'll talk about that shortly. So he was reported to be suffering from headaches and nausea because of this injury, and he had quite some time off to recover from this injury, and that's when he started writing his memoir, and his memoir was called Der Rot Kampfflieger, or the Red Battleflyer. So anyway, after a period of rest, Richthofen was back on deck, back flying with the Flying Circus, and on the morning of 21st of April 1918, um, Richthofen and several other Fokker triplanes were um, were on patrol, and they see a patrol of British Sopwith Camels from 209 Squadron RAF. Now, here's where it also becomes interesting because it seems that two novice pilots, one on each side, were, if not responsible, they definitely contributed to the events that would happen next. So the first rookie that contributed to what would come next was Canadian pilot Wilfred May. So May had been instructed to just kind of observe and stay out of the fight, but I guess he saw an opportunity and couldn't help himself. So he chased a German aircraft. Obviously pretty keen to get into the thick of it. Um, but this aircraft happened to be flown by another rookie, Wolfram von Richthofen. And if the name sounds familiar, yes, there was a relation. He was the cousin of the Red Baron. So the Canadian rookie starts chasing the the German rookie. German rookie was a cousin of Manfred von Richthofen, the Red Baron. Um, um, Manfred obviously sees this and decides to intervene. So we've got cousin von Richthofen in the front. We've got Wilfred May chasing cousin van Richthofen, and then we've got the Red Baron chasing Wilfred May. So all this was spotted by Canadian pilot Captain Arthur Roy Brown. Now, Brown was a friend of May's, and obviously, being a rookie, he felt he also had to look after him. Um, so, in order to get the Red Baron off his friend's tail, he actually needed to put his Sopwith Camel into a pretty steep dive in order to get the speed up. So, so Brown puts his camel into a steep dive, and he gets a chance to get one burst out on Richthofen before he has to pull out of the dive so he didn't crash into the ground. himself. Now, all this was happening at pretty low altitude. So, like I said before, this would not normally be a risk that Richthofen would be taken, but the fact that he was looking out for his cousin, and there's also speculation that he had some brain damage from his head injury and didn't realize he was actually flying so low. But yeah, this low flying was definitely out of character for the Red Baron. Um, so whether it was protecting his cousin, whether it was a brain injury, I guess that's another mystery that will never be known. Anyway, so we've got Roy Brown gets one burst um, out on Richthofen before he himself has to pull out of the dive. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Brown was not the only one firing on Richthofen. There were at least three Australian machine gunners who opened fire on the Red Fokker triplane. Now, I say at least, there were three machine gunners who were credited for opening fire, who were recorded to have opened fire, and I'm probably just speculating here, but being a lot of Australian soldiers on the ground there, I'm sure some others would have um, been tempted to fire upon the triplane. They were all armed with Lee Enfield 303 rifles, so um, I, and as I said, I'm only speculating here, but there's a strong possibility that some of them would have pointed their rifles at the plane and opened fire. But three Australian machine gunners were recorded to have opened fire on Richthofen, and they are Sergeant Cedric Popkin, Gunner Robert Bowie, and Trooper Snowy Evan. So Sergeant Evans will open fire with a Vickers machine gun, the same machine gun that was um, mounted on the Sopwith Camels flown by Allied pilots. And Gunner Bowie and Trooper Evans opened fire with a Lewis gun. Both weapons, however, um, fired a 303 caliber round, as did the Lee Enfield standard rifle carried by British and Australian soldiers. And that's going to, I guess, add to a bit of the discussion later on, as I'll explain. So they're all firing the same caliber round, even though there's two different machine guns there. So we've got four people that have opened fire on the Red Baron. At least four people. We've got one from up above, Captain Roy Brown, um, from his Sopwith Camel, and we've got three Australian gunners from the ground. Now, I would imagine forensics wasn't the best back then, back in 1918, but even so, um, the the triplane, the Fokker triplane, was actually pretty much pulled apart by souvenir hunters, by the Australian troops all wanting to claim a part of, I guess, the trophy of the Red Baron's aeroplane. Having said that, though, Richthofen's body was treated with utmost respect and was handed over to the AFC, the Australian Flying Corps, who buried Richthofen with full military honours. But before that, they did a bit of an autopsy, and they discovered that the cause of death was just one 303 round. Remember that caliber that all the weapons were firing, the same caliber? The 303 round. So this round could have come from any weapon: service rifle, a ground machine gun, an aircraft mounted machine gun. They all use the same caliber. But it was the entry and exit wounds that gave more insight into where this round came from. The autopsy found that the bullet entered the right side in the armpit and exited the left chest, meaning that the bullet travelled up. So this strongly suggests that the round came from the ground, not from the air. As I mentioned before, Captain Brown went into a steep dive from above to try and catch the Red Baron, so his fire would have come from above. So even though Captain Roy Brown was officially credited with shooting down the Red Baron, the evidence almost certainly suggests that the fire came from the ground. Now, before we go bagging out Captain Roy Brown for claiming the credit, um, he actually never claimed to have shot down the Red Baron. Um, he he did say he fired a burst, but never claimed to have shot down the Red Baron. And look, at the time, look, it probably looked obvious that he did to others that had seen it. Like I guess he was the last Allied plane seen to be attacking Richthofen, and it was just generally assumed that he did, but he never admit he wasn't certain. He always said he wasn't certain if his bullets were the one that brought down Richthofen's plane. So, with the evidence strongly suggesting that Richthofen was brought down by ground fire, the next question is, which Australian shot down the Red Baron? And the answer to that is it can never be proven with absolute certainty. Um, Firstly, as mentioned, all three machine guns fired the same caliber round. And as I mentioned before, even though three gunners were recorded to have opened fire, who's to say there weren't other soldiers with their Lee Enfield 303s, firing up at the aircraft. So it's one thing we're never going to know for sure, but there is it's almost certain that the Red Baron was shot down by Australian ground troops. Um, Sergeant Popkin is the one where most of the evidence points to, so he's one considered to be the most likely, um, simply because of his position, where he was firing from at the time. But who knows? Maybe it was Robert Bowie, maybe it was Snowy Evans, maybe it was some other soldier with his Lee Enfield. Um, but the almost conclusive evidence suggests that the Red Baron was shot down by ground fire. The other thing to bear in mind too is even if Roy Brown wasn't responsible for shooting down the Red Baron, he definitely attacked him from above, which possibly contributed to Richthofen flying so low as he was. So even though he didn't fire the fatal shot, um, obviously if you've got someone shooting at you from behind, you're a little distracted and probably found it harder to avoid ground fire. Yeah, so Roy Brown, even though he may not have fired the fatal shot, definitely had a part to play in all this. And so before I wrap this episode up, as I mentioned before, um, Richthofen's body was treated with honour. He was given a full military funeral by the Allies. 6 officers of the Australian Flying Corps served as pallbearers, so he was, even though an enemy, he was treated with the greatest respect and dignity. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this episode. It's actually taken me a couple of weeks of research. I really did want to kind of do a good job on this episode. Like I said, I was inspired by the conversation I had with the gentleman, the volunteer at at the military museums in Calgary. And I really want to give a big shout out to that museum, or it's actually called the Military Museums because there's several actually museums under the one area. The volunteers, the staff there that I talked to they were great, and it's look, I really enjoyed you know I guess seeing things from a Canadian point of view, seeing various conflicts um, that Canada has been involved with, sometimes alongside with Australians and sometimes not. So yeah, look, if you're visiting Calgary in Alberta, Canada, it's definitely go and see it. If you're from Canada and you haven't had a look, I definitely recommend going and having a look. When I travel, I usually if there's a military museum around, I usually go and have a look. I've been to a couple in New Zealand. I've been to the Auckland War Memorial Museum in Auckland, and it's got a whole floor. I think it's a three-floor museum, and I think it's the second floor is all dedicated to the the war memorial, and also in Wellington in New Zealand, the Te Papa um, Museum of New Zealand. Um, it's got an amazing Gallipoli exhibition. I highly recommend if you're over there, go and check that one out. That was just amazing. Um, they have these like amazing 2.5 times life figurines that they're made by the people that made all the stuff for the Lord of the Rings movie, and they're that detailed, and you kind of walk around the corner into this exhibit, and it just kind of hits you. So look, definitely go and see these museums around the place, and they're also quite often they're run by volunteers, or they have a strong volunteer component. Helping to run these things. So yeah, go and check these things out. Yep, so there you go. That's the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. Feel free to pop comments into the comment box. Let me know what you think. If you've got any other subjects about Australian military history that you'd like me to talk about, let me know because I actually do. Um, I haven't got an encyclopedic brain. I don't know everything. I actually put a lot of research into these things. So, and I do enjoy doing the research. So if there's any particular thing about Australian military history that you'd like me to do an episode about, yeah, feel free to pop a comment in the comment box. So thanks again for listening, guys, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.